All right. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to our second episode of the Top Line Podcast, Business Development for DFK. I am joined here by my co-host, Mr. Jeff Jacobs from Wilkins Miller. Jeff, how are we doing today?
Man, I'm good. Good to be here with you again. Excited to knock another one out. So it's good stuff.
We had a lot of fun before we get into the program day. We had a lot of fun in Dallas at the Managing Partner Conference where you and I shared the stage with Bill Wright to speak to the various managing partners about what our top six top items would be to coming out of the pandemic with business development. And I just got to say real quick, for those of you who were at the event and those that watched virtually, thank you all for that. But I had a blast, Jeff, with you and Bill on stage.
Yeah, man, it was so much fun, and I think we're going to try and do something like that again in the future. I don't know when or the details, but hopefully it won't be the last time we're together putting something together.
Absolutely. And I look at like the interaction that not only you and I had and the other people that were at the event, but it was our first event back since the pandemic. And, one of the things that I had to start working on, which I did in a while, was, reading body language. And when you network in person of, okay, I got to sneeze, let me run 30 feet away from somebody so they don't get all weirded out from me. That was one thing that was I was very in tune with was, the people aspect to it,
Yeah, yeah, no, it was good to be in front of people again, and that's a really smart group of people. You know what I mean? And so it's really good to hear their thought process on what's important in their firms. And for me, I had a lot of takeaways, some things that I was able to bring back home for my individual firm, and so it was a great time. The people were great. The venue was wonderful, and I just learned a lot. So
yeah, one major thing I took away was the client experience book that came out in our committee session. You remember that when they were talking about,
yeah,
what's the Disney experience and physically laying out what each client should be experiencing when they work with us. And, it actually brings us to the topic today because, at the end of the day, people are hiring us and the experience that people get are going to be the thing that creates the loyalty, that creates them to be recommending us to other people and, creating raving fans and whatnot. So I thought today would be a good topic to just talk about people, because as we open back up and understand how important the relationships we create and the connections we make with people, that all translates into connecting with more people, to more business, to keeping more business. Would you agree?
yeah, totally agree. I mean, every interaction I have at the firm, we can be talking about strategy, we can be talking about client-based stuff, prospecting, anything, and all of it is people-centered. You can control the numbers. It's really hard to control the people.
Mm-hmm.
And so every problem we run into or every opportunity for improvement we run into as a firm is usually people-centered. And so anyways, I totally agree. Success with people equals success in business.
And how do you measure that in terms of really making headway with people internally? Let's just start internally per se.
Yeah. So internally, one of the things we do is we have a survey that we do once a year, and then we also have a retreat, which we're in the middle of. Actually, we had a part of it last week. We're all doing it virtually this year, but we had part of it last week, and then we've got the last section or the second section of our retreat tomorrow, and we get feedback, we gather their feedback, we bring in a consultant, that consultant sort of tallies the feedback and says, this is where we are as a firm, this is where our culture looks to be. Now, do you agree with that? We have whole day sessions around it. We spend a lot of time and effort and money on making sure that our people are where they need to be for their career.
Yeah.
And I think you have to be intentional about it. You can't just say, well, we're all about our people and never ask, how are you? And get a collective consensus.
I love the fact that when you ask someone, how are you and where are you at in terms of your fulfillment and your achievement, all those things. Like for us with Friedman U, when I'm working with our younger folks, we're helping really establish their business development identity so that they can go out to the world and start to develop a book of business and be more successful. But that all stems from their own why and who they are and how they fit into the equation of not only just being an accountant, but being an accountant at Friedman. And what does that mean to them overall? And the biggest, I guess, lesson I've learned in just hearing their feedback is understanding that they are driving towards a bigger purpose, that it's not just about that, that audit or that tax return or that matter they're working on. It's about what does it at the end of the day do for the other people, and how do we help people.
What's the most meaningful part of that training for them, right? Not necessarily for you, but where would you say they get the most out of that training?
The best, I think, for me is watching them make the journey of the confidence of telling their story in a compelling, concise way, that would be deemed, your elevator pitch. A lot of times, people just say, I'm an auditor for a mid-sized accounting firm based out of New York, or they'll think about, I work in a specific industry, or I do a certain task. But when you can wrap it in a story that gets someone to listen to it and be excited about it, and tell it in a confident way. So I think the biggest thing that I see, and it's different for everybody. Everybody goes into the program with different goals and different intentions. They're at different parts of their career in terms of, where they're coming from, age and whatnot. But the biggest thing is that they all walk out with the confidence to be able to tell their story a little bit more confidently than they could have in the past. Because for me, it's if they're happier, and they're more fulfilled, that means that they're going to be better at convincing other people that their passion is authentic and organic. Because if they fake it, you can't teach someone, all right, here's your elevator pitch. If they say this, you go out and say, I'm the best at XYZ. If you teach them, a script, I just got done watching Toy Story last week with one of my daughters, and, Woody has the string that gets pulled out of his back. There's a snake in my boots,
Yeah.
That was a great Toy Story impression there.
Perfect. Spot on, actually.
Spot on. Was that? There's a snake
Woody
in my boots.
Yeah.
Anyway, you can't teach them the pull the string out, say this, because that comes off as being fake and inauthentic, and the other person is going to perceive that they've been trained this way. But if I can get that person to be able to come up with, maybe 7 or 12 different bullet points about them that are interchangeable, that they change based on the setting that they're in, the audience that they're talking to, and the goal they have in the conversation, then they can be much more confident delivering it, because they're not trying to A, just repeat what they've been taught, or B, think about it on the spot. So I think that's the biggest takeaway I like, is that I'm giving them an authentic response of who they are, why they are, what they do, and why does it matter to somebody else.
Yeah, I think what that reminds me of is you mentioned your daughters. It's just like raising kids. You know what I mean? Like you're constantly trying to figure out, what does success look like for my family? How can I motivate my kids to do the things that are going to make them successful? And if I try to approach each kid the same way, I'll fail miserably.
Yep.
Because I've got one that's real analytical, and I've got another one that's a little more artsy, and she's not as type A. And it's this. I think what can happen in business is we always want to scale, right? We always want to make one decision that scales across the organization, and when it comes to people, you just can't do it that way. It doesn't work. I'm from Alabama, so Alabama football is a thing here. And Nick Saban is a master of this. He has on staff a team of psychologists that knows each individual player and how they respond and what sort of discipline they like. So, to try and apply one method to each employee or each accountant or whatever is, I just think you're doomed to failure if that's what you try and do. And so, one of the things we do at Wilkins Miller is we have, I'm sure a lot of firms do this, but we have a mentor program where each younger staff is assigned to a mentor, and then they're supposed to meet once a month for lunch or whatever, and ask some basic questions, follow up, where are you, what are your goals, how can we help you get there? And it's really getting to know that person one-on-one is the only way you're gonna know what makes them tick and move them into the rest of their career successfully.
Yep. I for one of the things with Freeman we do with ours, and we can talk operationally about the power of putting everybody through a personality test or a predictive index type of thing, and how that plays into how people interact and work as teams. You could also have that same conversation with how they have conversations with the external world, knowing who they are in terms of how they like to be approached and how to judge other people in terms of how they like to be approached. Some people like agendas before meetings. Some people like to, have a little bit of BS before you get to the meat of the conversation, right? And it's all about the other person and kind of mimicking that. But for me, when I'm interacting with people in Friedman U and I'm asking them, what does success look like for them? One of the key things I have them do is start a journal. And the journal is very simple. You can get very extended in terms of your self-evaluation and how do you reflect and whatnot. But the journal that I was taught in terms of helping people is every page represents a new week. So you only have to fill it out once a week, and you have to answer 3 questions. First question is, what challenged me this week? So what's something that I could not have foreseen that was going to happen, that happened, that really challenged me, that I had to learn a lesson this week? Second is, what am I proud of this week? So what did I do that I'm really proud of myself? Give myself an attaboy or an attagirl, that I pushed myself above my comfort zone or whatever the thing would be. And the last thing is, who did I impact this week? And that question could be taken a couple different ways. Some people would take the impact this week as, I went above and beyond for people that I work with. So when you're thinking about maybe some of your superiors or partners that you work for, how did you this week go above and beyond to make their lives easier, to make their jobs easier, to make them happier? Or even people that are on your team or below you, what did you do this week to teach them something new, or to go above and beyond for that? And when you get into the weekly habit of doing this, the cool thing that I saw after the first class was that some of the people that went through it said that they stopped actual journaling because they thought in the moment, they were more present in the moment when they were interacting with that person. They recognized an opportunity that a challenge was coming down, or I just did something that I wasn't comfortable doing. And that that being present in the moment was such a cool lesson that I thought that my coach taught me that I'm really happy that other people are doing now.
Yeah, that's I really like that idea. Have a journal. I hate to say that it's more empty than it is full. One of the things that comes to mind when I think about the accountants and the people that I get calls from on a weekly basis is it's hey Jeff, I've got this scenario and it's something complex. We really need to work with this client because we're having trouble getting the message across. Do you get calls like that? I'm just curious. Like, do you get calls from the accountants who are like, hey, I need help with this?
Yep.
Does that happen to you pretty regularly?
It does happen to me, not regularly, but it happens when, there is specifically with a new prospect or someone that we're working for, to gain their trust to work with them. And the biggest thing that I tell them is asking as many questions as possible so that we can understand what is going to motivate that other person. So let's just give you a quick example. If I met with a CFO last week virtually, and she was talking about them needing their first audit. And I was asking them, pretty basic questions about them as a company and things that we would do from a scoping perspective. But then, some of the other questions I asked were, so who else are they comparing us to? What other firms are they looking at? What are some important things that they want to see stand out in the relationship that they create with their auditor? Because it's the first time. It's not like we're going against someone who has dropped the ball in the past and they're looking to make a change because of that, or, the pricing is different than they wanted it to be and they're making a change. This is the first time. So we get to set the expectations for them, but the expectations could be anywhere based on that. So the question asking is huge for me in terms of understanding what is motivating that other person. And that could be even just from a personality perspective. When you and I talk about, remember I told you in Dallas, the what's everyone's favorite radio station? Do you remember I said that at dinner?
No.
Well, what's that? Well, I guess it was a great story that I told.
Super memorable.
No, I don't remember that at all, Matt. Thanks. It was right around dessert time, I guess, when we were singing "Happy Birthday" to the table next to us.
Yeah.
What's everyone's favorite radio station is What's In It For Me Radio, WIIFM. And if you could find out what that other person's motivations are quicker and in an organic way, then you can speak the language that they want to hear, and then therefore you can be more not persuasive, but better at convincing your message to them.
Yeah. Is so true. And understanding where someone is coming from, specifically in the sales process, is just so important, and maybe not in the sales process, maybe in the relationship building process. Let me say that, because just for example, we just brought on a new client, and we met with the two owners, and the two owners were explaining, their goals, and this is what they're after. And one of the biggest pieces of the puzzle is they have a controller, and that controller has been there for 30 years. And we're not using names, so I can kind of give a little bit of detail there. She's can be difficult at times. She's what I call a keys to the kingdom person, right? So she has the keys to the kingdom, and she doesn't give those away very easily. She has all the answers, and so from what I could tell from the conversation with the owners was her job was everything to her, right? And so we were sending out one of our accountants to go meet with her and just get some initial background information to sort of set up them as a client and start the process. And so she called and she said, "Hey, I'm going to meet with this girl from our meeting. I'm a little nervous. What should I do?" And I just said, "Well, we were both in the meeting, and it really sounds like she, the controller, gets a lot of value, personal value, from her job, right? So think about it. If you go in there and you start trying to take over and say, this is what we're going to do, and we need to move this, shake this up over here. If that's if you come in hot like that, you're never going to be able to build trust, and the relationship is going to fail from the start." So I said, you have to take into account what this lady is feeling, and, the fact that her job is everything to her, and that's where she gets all of her value. And so I said, you need to come in and say, "Man, it looks like you've got this thing wrapped up." And then you need to ask a bunch of questions, personal questions, and really get to know her. And so I think the takeaway is, when you're introducing yourself or meeting a new client or meeting someone else, you really have to look at their scenario, their personality, and pay attention. It's so easy to come into any conversation knowing what you want to say and say it. But it's so much more difficult to come into a conversation being inquisitive, asking the questions, and being truly, genuinely interested in that person and what they're trying to get from that conversation. And that's one of the things that I'm constantly talking to our accountants about, which is, it's not about you. My dad told me that my whole life. I think I said that in my last podcast. I'll probably say it every podcast. But it's not about you. That's right. It's about the other person. And when you go into a meeting, I don't care what kind of meeting it is, if you make it about them, you'll be successful. And that's a really hard thing for anybody to get to. So.
If you mind, I'd love to go deeper into that, because I think what you just, the example you gave is a great lesson that I think we can even just, kind of spitball. I know it's off topic for a second, but when you look at that meeting itself, there's a couple key elements that go into making that a successful meeting, right? So if you were before that meeting, right, if I were to ask you, Jeff, you got this meeting set up, what does success look like for you at the end of this meeting? What has to happen at the end of that meeting for you to say that was successful? What would that be?
For me, what I want her to I want her to know, the controller, I want the controller to know that we are there to make her successful. Right. That's what I want. I want her to know that we're there, and our goal is to make her look good. My father-in-law owned a dental practice for a long time. And he told me when I was real young, he said, "Jeff, the only thing you ever have to do in business is make your boss successful." And I've always remembered that. And it's so true. Mm-hmm. And in that instance, we're just trying to make the client successful.
Is your father-in-law your dentist?
He was. Yeah.
He
was my dentist. Yeah. I started dating my wife when I was 16. Wow. And so, anyways, so he's been my dentist for quite a while.
So I guess that's a good thing, you treat her right, because if not, then, that drill might get a little harder.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, I've ever made him mad. Yeah.
Are you sure? I don't think I have a cavity here, sir. Yes, you do. I think you do. Okay. That's great. But I love that, dude. And if you think about the aspect of the woman sitting in that chair, if you give her that confidence that you're there to support her, make her feel better, and make her more confident in you, that you're not there to take her job, her walls are going to come down. She's going to be much more collaborative with you than the opposite. So going back into that again, if you're listening out here, okay, if you run into that situation, how do you prepare for that? Knowing that you're walking into what could be a defensive type of atmosphere, right? So if you walk in and the guard is up, and your job is to get that guard down to make them feel more comfortable. What are some things that you can do prior to that meeting to prep yourself to help get that guard down? Here's some things, and again, this is just off the top of my head. Here's some things that I would want to do. One, that I would probably want to see my team scavenger their social media threads to see if I can find anything personal about that person before I walk into the office. If you read all the sales books, they always say, like, when you sit down, be observant, look for the pictures, look for things that you can relate to that person. Is there a fishing picture? Is there a baseball picture? Is there a picture of something, or a degree from some school that you have some sort of connection? But now the power of social media allows you to research this person prior. And that could be just going on their LinkedIn from an immediate perspective and seeing, what college they went to, what not-for-profits they support, what books they like, but going maybe even deeper on their Facebook and seeing that they have 3 or 4 dogs, or they just took a trip to Arizona. Any information, intel that you can get on that person as a person prior, you can use for your benefit at some point in the meeting. It's not like you're going to walk in and be like, "Hey, John, I heard you went to Arizona last week. How was Scottsdale?" And he's going to say, "How did you know that?"
Creepy.
Yeah. And by the way, John, your living room furniture looks great from the outside.
Behind these bushes, it all looks wonderful.
Yes. And my binoculars are not that good. So any intel that you can use, you can use. I remember once we had one where I walked into a meeting and it was the same kind of environment. I knew I had to make sure I won one specific person over in the meeting, and she was going to be the key to the rest of the team. And I found out that she was a tango dancer in her day. She loves tango dancing. And Jeff, me, I used to be a dancer back in the day. So I wasn't going to walk in saying, "Hey, I heard you like the tango, I'm a dancer." But I figured out a way to bring up dance at some point in the meeting. And I asked her, sister, "So how did you get into this role that you're in now? What's how long you been doing it for?" So I got her talking about her history of her career. And then naturally she's going to say, "Well, Matt, how did you get into your role?" And I can actually say, and this is the truth, that I started my career as a dancer. And she said, "You were a dancer?" I said, "Yeah." And I went to about all the different dance classes I've taught or I've done before. And I could tell that her eyes were opening up a little bit because dance was something that she loved. Now, some could say that that's manipulating the conversation to your own benefit. And maybe to a degree it is, but it's using the information that's out there. So preparing for the meeting is just as important as going into the meeting from a personal perspective outside of just a business, to get that person to like you so that their guard comes down.
Yeah, 100%. There's a framework that I try and use for our meetings, and I think I even talked about it at the managing partners meeting. But the acronym for it is ODE, ODE. So it's optimal, desired, and essential. And so even if you've got, sometimes I've got 20 minutes with a partner or a manager before we step into a meeting with a prospect, and that's a really simple way to say, all right, what's the optimal outcome from this meeting? The moon and the stars, what do we want to try and what could we get from this meeting? And then you've got desired, which is, okay, this isn't the moon and the stars, but we're middle of the ground. This is a great meeting if we nail these things. And then essential is, these are the things that if we don't come away with these things in this meeting, it's a failure. Yeah. We have not succeeded. And so just doing that, just listing out the optimal, desired, and essential outcomes of the meeting, for me, if I've got just a little bit of time, is a great thing to do because it really sets the tone of the meeting and allows you to go and prepare.
And I want to talk about that in a second, but you reminded me of that phrase that, if you shoot for the stars and you fail, at least you land on the fluffy clouds, and that's true, right? Because if you shoot for your goals and you identify what they are and you understand what the second level goal is, then you at least are more aware of what's happening in the meeting itself. And what I want to talk about, what I love when you talk about, connecting with people, is getting their input and their buy-in on the conversation. And too often we do come into the meeting with our own ego in mind and guns blazing. We're going to ask all the questions we want, and we're not even going to take into account, what does success look like for the other person in the meeting? What do they want to achieve out of this meeting? And if you start every meeting with, "Hey, Jeff, great to meet you today. Thanks for having me. So, I appreciate the next 20 minutes that we have. I understand that you have an important timeline here. What does success look like for you in the next 20 minutes with us meeting today?" by putting you on that spot and asking you that question as the potential buyer or other person that's part of this conversation, it makes it more of back to the dancing, that we're both dancing. We're not just one leading the other one, because when both are doing back and forth and identified that success, it's going to get that other person to connect much quicker. And then that obviously leads you to say, here's what I'm looking to achieve in this meeting. And here's some talking points that I think we're going to start at. Is there any other things that you want to include in this agenda that I didn't include? By getting their buy-in and getting their input, could maybe get them talking about something that you couldn't even think about. It could get them to rearrange the agenda so that the most important things you want to talk about get talked about at the first part. Too often we waste too much time thinking about, I have to get to all these things just so I can ask my money question at the end. It's like, well, that's the most important. Why don't you ask that at the front and get that person's buy-in to ask that at the front?
Yeah. And the other thing that establishing goals at the beginning of a conversation does is it gives you a footing. So, for instance, right, we're in a meeting the other day, and this is a fairly new client. They're on board. We met with them a little bit, but the owner has goals, but then his actions, the things he does with the business and what he does with his money is not helping him achieve those goals, right? So essentially, we've got to go in as a firm and as consultants and have a difficult conversation, right? And so we've got to go in and say, all right, this is where you want to be, but you got all these things going on. So instead of us going into that meeting and jumping into, all right, this is what we've seen. These are the problems that we've come across. And we think you need to change these things. As opposed to coming in with that first, if you come in with that goals conversation and say, all right, before we get started, let's just make sure we're all heading in the same direction. What are your goals? Where are you trying to get? What do you want to do with the business, right? And then what that does is it gives you a grounding. So now when you go to say, all right, so let's talk about some of the things we've seen in your accounts and some changes we need to make. So when you start to get pushback from the owner, well, no, that's the way we've always done it. It's worked for us this long. Why are we going to change it? Well, now instead of you just being like, well, we just need to know, all you have to do is say, well, 10 minutes ago, we just talked about your goals, right? And you want to be in a different position in 5 years, right? So doing this thing that we're telling you to do will get you there, right? It's so much easier to say, no, you just told me we change. And now you're telling me you don't. So establishing the goals conversation or having that goals conversation at the beginning oftentimes makes making difficult points easier in a meeting.
I love that. I love the when you ask the difficult questions, asking permission to ask the difficult questions is great, because that gets them to open the keys to the door. Do you mind if I ask a question that might make you feel uncomfortable in terms of your business? Do you mind if or even saying in the beginning, here's what we're going to talk about in our agenda today. Some of that part might get uncomfortable, or some of that part might be, not something you're willing to share. Let's just say you're trying to get to like pricing. What are they paying their current, team? Things like that. By asking permission and getting the expectations that this is where you're going, it allows them to kind of be a part of that dance as well. I was trying to think about what the phrase was, but the phrase is, it takes two to tango. And see, it just came full circle, right? This was all not planned, everybody.
We're just
spewing here, and that was good. It takes two to tango. We're going to name this episode, It Takes Two to Tango.
I like it.
That's what it should be called. Episode 2. It takes two, and it'll be the number 2. It takes two to tango, episode 2.
I'm all about it.
I digress. Another thing I wanted to ask you about, Jeff, is taking care of people. When we're in understanding people, key to business success, taking care of people, I think, is such a huge lesson that people sometimes get to the back of their mind about how they can proactively do that. Any lessons that come to the top mind for you for that?
Man, there's an old saying, and now I can't think of it, but it's people don't care about what you have to say until they know you care. Some version of that, right? Mm-hmm. But we'll just talk about internally first, and then we can move external, because it applies externally too. Internally, making sure that the accountants and the people in the staff and the administrative folks know that you care about them as an individual and them and their family has garnered more respect for me personally in my own career, has moved me forward at the firm faster than anything else I've done. Any strategy I've put in place, any new client that I've brought to the table, my genuine care and concern for the people of the firm has done more for my career than anything else I've done. And so when you talk about caring for people, that's something I'm super, super passionate about. I mean, it's simple. It's not difficult. It's having one-on-one conversations. It's being intentional, stopping and taking the time to say, hey, how's your mom doing? I know last time we talked, you said she was sick. And if you have to, go back to your desk and write it down. Have a list next of the people in your firm and what's going on in their lives. Obviously, like, I didn't lock it or keep it safe or whatever. But I forget things, right? And so being intentional about remembering what's going on in people's lives is hugely important, and letting them know that you care.
Yeah.
And so I don't know if you have anything you want to add to that on the internal piece before we move external.
Yeah, I mean, that's just gaining your colleagues' respect. If we're on the same team here and we're part of a family of culture that we outwardly say to our prospects and referral sources in the world, we have to truly embody it internally, and it's not just a mission statement that we write words down and then that's it. It's the care doesn't come from the care just of the quality of the work. Obviously that's assumed, or the care doesn't come from the fact that you're going to work as hard as you can to get the work done. But the care comes into, I'm going to be spending just as much time, if not more time, with my work family than my real family. So I need to make sure that I earn their respect. And the best way to do that is to truly be a part of their lives on top of just who they are from a 9 to 5 perspective, but more from a 5 to 9 when they're outside of work. Not that that's anything normal. That's pre-COVID talk. You're listening to like 9 to 5. What was that? But yeah, I've seen it all the time. I came in, listen, man, my own story. I came in as a non-accountant. I had no accounting training before I joined Friedman. Friedman took such a chance on me in 2016 as a person who came from the marketing and events world. Hospitality was always the key theme of my entire career, which, hospitality is taking care of people. And I knew the first thing that I needed to do before I did any type of sales for outwardly sales was that I had to earn everyone's respect at my firm. And that was not something that I knew was going to come lightly. I had to make sure I was intent about doing that. And part of that was just truly getting to know who they were and what makes them tick and why they become what they do and what success looks like for them and how would they want to depend on me and much deeper things than just work. Yeah, that's what I would say from an internal perspective is just understanding that the respect isn't given, it's earned, and it's not earned as something you hang on the wall and it stays there the rest of your career. You earn it and then you have to maintain it, because again, we're people, we're human beings with emotions and feelings and goals and all that stuff. So
yeah, anyway. I mean, no, that's great. And I think that's one of the best pieces of advice I could give our younger staff. You know what I mean? You want to come in and you want to produce and you want to show everybody what you're made of. But my advice to you would be come in with humility. Humility goes a long way. It allows you to ask questions that you wouldn't ordinarily ask. It allows you to get to know somebody that you might not ordinarily know. And so probably that is my biggest piece of advice for a younger staff coming into a firm is come in with some humility. Ask questions, get to know people, and be genuinely interested in somebody else.
Yep.
And without taking pretty
Absolutely.
Care externally. Where my mind goes when you say that, we're talking about external. So I think what I would call a CLI meeting, a center of influence meeting. So somebody that's not a direct prospect, but has the ability to refer us clients, right? So that type of meeting where I'm sitting down having and it's easy to go into that type of meeting as well, knowing what I want, optimal, desired, and essential outcomes for the meeting, right? But really, what my focus needs to be, especially in an initial meeting, is what is this person trying to achieve? This is somebody I'm trying to win over and gain their trust. And if I come in with my own agenda and saying, well, I need to know, do you know this guy, and this guy? I'd like an introduction. The relationship it's going to be super transactional. It's going to stop right there. So the thing I tell our accountants to do in that scenario is ask a question. And when they ask you a question, you answer that question with another question. Why do you ask? Like you ask as many questions as you possibly can so you know exactly what that person is trying to achieve. And I don't care what it is. I don't care what they're doing. I want you to go back to the office and you spent 20 minutes on helping them in some way. I think I gave this example last time, but if they're looking for a plumber because their pipe's busted at the house, you go back to the office, look up the 5 best plumbers in town, and you shoot them an email, right? And again, that's being others focused. When you step into that meeting, again, it's not about you, it's about them. And that's how you care for that person. There's a Zig Ziglar quote that I think it says, if you help enough people in life get what they want, you'll eventually get what you want.
Yep.
And that's how I've tried to live my business.
I think helping the folks is getting them to tell you where they could use the help. And it's not going to happen minute one of the meeting. If you sit down and there's no personal building going on. If you're just talking about your own self, they're not going to get to a point. Imagine you and I sit down in a meeting, the first time we're meeting. Above our heads, I'm going to drop down here. Above our heads is a bubble of problems that are just going on in our lives. And it could be personal or professional, right? Those problems they're not like tattooed on our forehead. We're not wearing a sign. It's an invisible bubble above our head. It's up to the other person to ask the right questions, build enough rapport, get that person to feel so comfortable with them that they're going to reveal what's in their head. And then the truly part of taking care of them is not getting them just to reveal about what's going on in their lives. It's actually following through and seeing how you can help them. We hope that the need is something that we can, that's a service line that we offer as a firm, but 9 times out of 10, it's not, and if we're looking to get with someone there in terms of building a relationship, we got to be able to join their team. I've had so many times people reach out to me about, hey, Matt, do you know anybody that does this, this, and this? And my job as business development person and is to connect people together, is to be the guy that someone knows that says, Matt, call Matt Blank. He'll know somebody to help you out. And if I know someone or not, I'm going to make sure I find that person for them. And I'm going to follow through with that introduction to help them. All the time I'm asking people, family, my wife actually probably gets annoyed about it sometimes because I'm always like, she thinks I'm networking, but more I'm just asking questions to get to know someone. The biggest part I think for me is just asking a broad question and then thinking how they're going to answer that question. They listen for it, they answer, and then you ask a deeper question on that same topic. So if like you and I were networking right now, and I would say, something to the point of, so Jeff, how long you been at Wilkins Miller for? You tell me your answer, and then I'm going to say, okay, so what have you learned in the past, X amount of time you've been here? What's one of the biggest lessons you've learned, or the biggest takeaways, or how have you changed over those years? You say something else, I ask a deeper question. It's all about the questions and being prepared for that.
It is, man. And what's funny, you said, why is that you're networking? It just, to some people, that type of thing, being inquisitive comes naturally to some. Yep. Some people are just naturally curious, but because that happens to me. Like I'll be out somewhere and talking to somebody, and all of a sudden they're talking about their job and how they hate it, and I start asking, well, what do you want to do? What do you love to do? Where do you want to work? And then all of a sudden I'm trying to help them find a job somewhere. You know what I mean? So, something like that. But being curious, being inquisitive, asking the right questions, period, is a teachable skill. Do you agree with that?
Yes.
I agree with that.
Yes.
I think it's totally something that you can persevere and learn to do. It's not simple, but it really does. The first step to me, you feel free to disagree, is that mindset shift of it's not about me, it's about them. Right? I mean, would you agree with that?
Yes, I would.
Yeah. So
and I would say on top of that, if to think about it as a situation where you're a journalist or you're a you're an author of a book and you're writing a biography on someone. And in that small interaction you're having might just be a 5-minute conversation. But if you were to write a biography on that person, how would you approach the conversation? What questions would you ask that person? So always thinking about the fact that your job is to be more interested than interesting.
That's right. And there's I saw a TED talk the other day, and he put it this way. He said, your job is to pay attention, not get attention. And I really like that. Like that's right. I mean, because I can, when I'm in a meeting, my natural state and bent is to get attention, right? Is to show people how great I am. I'm not that great, but I want to show off what little I got, right? And so it's much more difficult to learn to pay attention as opposed to get.
Yep. I mean, it's kind of like when you get on stage, at a conference, right? And just 5 seconds before we're supposed to start, we spill water all over the place. I'm making a joke of you when you were on stage at a managing partner conference.
Okay, that happened. We don't need to tell the story, right?
We don't need to tell the story, but it was a funny story right 5 seconds before. Yeah, Carly, yes. I look at each interaction as we're human beings and we're not machines, and we're all motivated by different things. We all have different backgrounds, and anytime we meet someone, we have to just as you said earlier, set a benchmark, set a base level of who is this person, what motivates them in this conversation, in this meeting, and how can I truly understand that so that I can act accordingly to help move it forward. And if I have my own agenda above their agenda, then I'm missing the point completely.
Something that allows you to scale the question asking process, and every situation is different, right? So you can't ask a specific set of questions that's going to get you where you want to go every time, but you can ask a few questions and have those just on board and ready, right? So let's just say you go into a prospect meeting, one of the things that I'm working on specifically for our outsourced accounting division is a pre-call kind of checklist, and then also sort of a planned out list of questions. I know that seems simple, but if you just go in and you have a list of questions that you want to make sure that you hit in the meeting, go ahead and write it out. You know what I mean? Don't hope and pray that you remember the right questions to ask in the meeting. That's part of the essential piece, right? So if you determine what are those essential things we need to get out of the meeting, you need to go ahead and write down those questions before we walk into that meeting. I know that sounds, like I said, simple, and write them down, and you'll remember those questions. You'll make sure you come away with these.
I want to go one further. I want to go write down the questions that you want to ask, and then think about how are they going to respond to that question, so that you can start to role play different scenarios of how the meeting could play out. So you could have, in essence, already lived the meeting before you've gotten to the meeting. And you're going to love this, Jeff. I'm sure this is going to relate really well to you with your background and your papa, what he did. But I remember when my baseball coach taught me early in life, I played first base, and I don't know if I brought this up in the last one or whatever, but he always said, all right, blank, man on first, ball hit to the right on your ground. What are you doing with the ball? Man on first or second, ball hit to the left of you in the air. What do you do with the ball? And what that taught me was, in the 1 second from the ball leaving the pitcher's hand to the bat swinging, I already had known what I was going to do based on the situation that was going to play out. So I didn't have to think about it on the fly, because, in baseball, if you make 1 millisecond of a wrong decision, it could cost you an out or someone stealing a base, or whatever the case may be. But the point of the conversational piece of this is that the conversational sport that happens is playing this out in your head prior to, or even if you want to go one further and role playing it with some of your other colleagues. Hey, would you mind being this person and just playing this character for a second? I want to ask some questions and see how it goes. But the more we can prepare our mental space beforehand, the better.
Yeah, that's what a fantastic analogy. I love baseball analogies. So anticipate the play, right? So anticipate what are the scenarios that could happen. And then once you've done that for a full season, you don't have to think about it anymore, right? It's now ingrained into your mind. Okay, if this happens, I'm going to do this, and you don't have to have that it doesn't require that extra step of mental preparation
Yep.
because now you've trained yourself. The same thing happens with question asking. So you practice, and you role play out in your head, okay, what's the probable response here, like you said. And then my point I'm making is eventually you don't have to go the extra mile, and play out the scenario because now you've seen it and done it enough that you can just get there and make the play.
And the same thing goes with the conversation we had earlier about preparing for any type of conversation in an employee or a prospect, whoever it is. Just playing it out before it actually happens is the most important part. I'm thinking about my golf tournament I had this weekend, and I should have prepared for how bad I was going to play on Sunday. But I woke up on Sunday, day 2 of the golf tournament. And I said, "Oh, we just played yesterday, three 9-hole matches. I'm going to be fine on Sunday. I don't need to go to the range. I don't need to go putt again." Well, here they double rolled the greens the second day, and here, I was tighter the second day than the first day, and I didn't work that out prior. And what happens when I stand on the first tee box? I shank the ball to the left, and I don't do. What do they say? You play the way you practice, and exactly that's the reason why I lost on Sunday. So, sorry, I'm just getting upset about it because we almost won it. We were close. We were close to winning it, Jeff, but we didn't. Anyway,
So
we're coming up on.
Were you the only one on your team that choked, or was it like, okay?
I absolutely let my partner down. So, Kevin, if you're listening to this, I am very much sorry that you drove up from Carolina to Pennsylvania to play 3 rounds of golf in 100-degree heat and lose it on the last day because your partner didn't show up. So I apologize.
Man, I'm really glad I could point that out.
Yes.
Just bring that back.
Yeah. I'm almost there. Like there almost must be a little tear coming out.
It's healthy to talk about it though. You got to get it out.
Yeah. It's going to sting for a little bit, but you got to have short memory and move on, and
right.
learn. That's the biggest thing, right? We don't lose, we learn. And, that could be a topic for us for another one is, when you do lose in a meeting or you lose a potential engagement, how do you learn from that and adjust so that you don't make that same mistake the next time? And there's all kinds of learning moments that you can create when you lose. So maybe that's our theme for episode 3. We'll go into that. So anyway, ladies and gentlemen, I think we're up on our 45 minutes here that we were looking to achieve today. That was one of the feedback we got was like, it's a little too long, make it a little shorter. It's a little more consumable. So we appreciate that. Jeff, any other last thoughts you want to add to the group here before we end today?
No, man, it's just always a pleasure to spend time with you. I learn a lot every time we talk and we laugh a little bit. It's a good time. And no, that's good. I'm just glad to be here.
Me too, man. I'm grateful for the hour that we have. I'm grateful for the opportunity to meet you and to just talk. I mean, we didn't rehearse any of this, everyone. For us, it's just, what are we going to talk about today? Let's talk about taking care of people. There's a lot of great things in taking care of people. I said, all right, Jeff, let's run with it. So just so everybody knows, there's not a lot of prep time that goes into this because we do have such a good rapport. But the best part about it is that, lessons that go into it always at the top line that comes out. So thank you for joining us at our second episode of the DFK Business Development Podcast, The Top Line. We'll see you. Oh, by the way, that was called It Takes Two to Tango. That's the name of this episode. We'll see you for episode 3 coming up real soon. Thanks, everybody. Have a good day.
Bye-bye.